You both took part in a fascinating study, multi-trillion-dollar and multi-million worker contributions. Give us a sense, Phillip, I will start with you, how long it would take for this trillion-dollar loss to be realized.
So we essentially looked at this executive order, looked at those that were born to two undocumented or two temporary immigrant parents, both in the past, so they're already currently working in the workforce, as well as those in the future. And we essentially, as totaling all that up in terms of an accounting exercise, we determined that there would be about $7.7 trillion that they would have contributed within the next few decades, as well as the past few decades. When it comes to those in the future, that $1 trillion number, that would be realized over their working lifetimes. So many of them, of course, are not yet to be born. We'd be born in the next few decades, but then those individuals will likely become adults later on and be able to contribute to the workforce. And that could be that potential $1 trillion loss.
And for just looking at these numbers, it looks like certain parts of the country are likely to feel this more than others. Where are the parts of the country that could really be impacted by this?
Yeah, so the geographical differences in the impacts really boil down to demographic differences. Basically, if we think about California and Texas, that's where the largest group of beneficiaries of birthright citizenship live. So just those two states would account for about 1/3 of the overall effect. But the other 2/3 are really spread all over the country.
So it would be something that you think most Americans would notice the impact of?
Yes, definitely. So just in those two states, California and Texas, we estimate that there are over 1 million people, U.S. citizens, that gained their citizenship thanks to the birthright citizenship law.
Wow.
Pretty staggering numbers here when you consider these two states. In California, more than $2 trillion alone, almost 1.5 in Texas. These are economies larger than some countries, Phillip. When you just put the California and Texas effect in place alone, could this be recessionary?
Well, it's hard to say of how that could play out with a number of other factors. This wouldn't be immediate. It would be something that we felt over a longer period of time, and that was the aim of the study, to give that broad lifetime look. Sometimes, as we look into these numbers, we want to be careful to be able to see that long-term effect. So the numbers would kind of speak for themselves in terms of the volume. I would add also that in our estimates here, we really went a very conservative approach to really define the population as being those that were children of two undocumented parents that were living in the U.S. today and maybe would have children in the future. And so these numbers are very conservative. It could be as twice as much, depending on what kind of assumptions you put on the data. So this certainly would have a strong impact if birthright citizenship were to be denied for these individuals into the future.
And Francesc, I'm looking at a big graph here that shows all the different economic sectors that could be hit hardest. Surprisingly, you have office administration at the top, and then other things like construction, architecture. Where do you think this would be most noticed the soonest, were this to be, I don't even know how you want to say it, reversed, or if the president's policy would be upheld and birthright citizenship as we know it were to be altered in some way?
So most likely, if the executive order were to be sustained and were to be implemented, most likely the effects, it would not be applied retroactively. So this means that the group of people who would be most harmed by the order are yet to be born. So in that sense, the impact would not be immediate. It would just unfold over the next couple of decades.
So then how did you make that estimation that these are the industries that were going to be harmed the hardest? Is it just looking forward at where you expect growth and these individuals to be working and extrapolating from there?
Yeah, so basically like that. So what we do in our study is we use current data about working age individuals who benefited from birthright citizenship, learn about what are the occupations where they are employed, what are the earnings that they are making in those occupations, and then based on those data, we project forward to see to estimate what would be the impact for the future beneficiaries. So we rely on existing data on current adults to make predictions about what would be the contribution to the labor market and to the economy, to GDP, of current children beneficiaries and future beneficiaries over the next couple of decades.
You know, Phillip, I'm sure you can speak to the fact that this could potentially exacerbate an already major problem. When we talk about industries like construction, like agriculture, that have already been on their heels because of the president's mass deportation policy, what would it mean to add these continued job losses? These industries might not be able to function in some cases, no?
Yeah, so it's a really broad look. In fact, we have an aging population in the United States right now.
Yeah.
Labor shortages are going to probably exist well into the future at a variety of industries. You named a few. What could really be telling in the decades ahead is the fact without birthright citizenship, these individuals would have no access to essentially post-secondary education. And we found that nearly 2/3 of those in the past actually were working in industries that required some high level of higher education. And so you're going to be missing out on that total workforce, that more educated workforce, because they wouldn't have had access under a citizenship to actually obtain those kind of jobs. So it would create in many ways an entirely underclass of individuals that wouldn't even have access perhaps even to jobs that you mentioned earlier in the construction industry as well as the agricultural industry because of their legal status.
Wow.
Before we let you guys go, I just want to know, I know you said this is not a political study, and before coming on, we were told you guys don't want to talk about the politics of this. You want to talk about it as an economics issue, something I can get on board with. But I do want to ask you, from a human perspective, from a perspective of what the U.S. means globally, what kind of message do you think it's sending to the global economy, to allies, and even people who aspire to maybe live in the U.S. someday? What kind of message this is sending if, in fact, this executive order is upheld and birthright citizenship, as we know it, no longer exists in its current form?
It's a world that we really don't know of in the United States, where birthright citizenship doesn't exist. In fact, that's one of the challenges of the study, to be able to get an idea of what that would be in the future, because we don't really have comparisons to evaluate it. And so looking to the future, I think it certainly speaks to the fact that if this executive order were to stand, we would have that underclass. And although in some ways an undocumented population that's already here today are functioning in our workforce, but they have limitations because of their legal status, you would further have a population that wouldn't be able to access education potentially. It would be an experience that really we don't comprehend totally because we've never seen it before.
Francesc, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add that, so if we take a broader, an international perspective, there are countries where citizenship is not connected to birthplace. It's passed from parents to children, and children get the nationality of their kids. However, we have to be careful in extrapolating to the US, because in those countries, usually there are already established ways through which children born to, let's say, undocumented or temporary residents.
Right, that's been the policy for several decades, if not longer. Yeah.
Right, so in those countries, there are ways that those children can eventually naturalize. But currently in the US, those pathways do not exist. So it's hard to extrapolate from the experience of other countries, and it's safer to think about what has been the experience of the US and the current practice, and this would be a very big departure from that.